Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Curtis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, witnesses. This is a great hearing. As I listened to your testimonies, it caused a lot of reflection in my mind. Gentlemen, I represent, as Brian knows, a district in Utah that has a county by the name of Carbon County. I'd love to ask my colleagues here, what do you suppose they do in Carbon County? And what I've seen over the 5 years that I've represented them is what I call the demonization, and unfortunately, not just the demonization of coal, but the demonization of people. And what's unfortunate about that is these are the very people who have sacrificed their health, have sacrificed their safety for generations and generations, so the rest of us can go over to a wall switch and flip on the switch and have the lights come on and keep the temperature at 70 degrees. And I wish more often people felt a little more connection with where this power source came from and appreciation for these very, very good men and women. And Mr. Franklin, much of this is the Navajo Nation. I take in about a third of the Navajo Nation. There's about 5 tribes that that have a connection, even though they don't all live in my district. And I've watched things like the Hopi Nation lose 80% of their revenue when they shut down the coal-fired power plant there by Antelope Island. And sometimes we talk about environmental justice, and I wonder where is the justice to these communities dealing with these issues? And I think frequently, because it's unseen, that it's not dealt with. And Mr. Franklin, I also express a commitment to better understand some of the things that you've told us in your testimony and how it impacts those people. I know there's a lot of uranium mines that have not been resolved, not just in the Navajo area, but throughout my district. I think it's important that as we go forward, we also look back and make sure we're being good stewards there as well. Imagine the hypocrisy in Carbon County when they see that there's actually not enough coal coming out of their coal mines for the coal-fired power plant there because it's going overseas to Europe at a much higher price and being burned by our European counterparts who brag and shout from the housetops how clean they are. And yet they're paying sometimes upwards of 400% more for that coal than the contracts in those local coal plants are. And it's viewed as nothing but hypocrisy, right, by these good men and women. And Mr. Summers, thank you for being here. You mentioned in your testimony this problem that we have, that 2/3 of our state is owned by the federal government. That's exasperated in much of my district. Now, wrap your arms around this. 7 of the counties I represent are 90% federally owned. So imagine trying to eke out a living, an economy, anything when 90% of the land doesn't pay property tax, where there's an attack to keep all mining off of these federal lands. And Brian, somehow the state is able to regulate these and meet the high standards where the federal government isn't. What lessons would you like the federal government to learn from Utah's permitting program that we might be able to implement federally?
Thank you very much, Congressman. I think that, again, in Utah, if a mining operation is primarily on state or private lands and doesn't have a significant federal overlap, again, we can get them through permitting process in 2 to 3 years versus 7 to 10 years on the federal side. And I think a lot of that is just the fact that there are clear delineations of authority and responsibility to our state agencies. So, you don't have this massive overlap where you never quite know exactly where your permit is in the process and which agency you need to go and talk to. And I think even just that one step of having a centralized, agency of primary lead agency for permitting on the federal side would be a great first step to take.
Are you aware of any shortcuts or environmental damages that occur because our process is 2 or 3 times quicker?
No.
Could anybody here point to anything that puts the land in jeopardy because our processes are 2 or 3 times quicker?
No, and I think that part of the advantage, frankly, of having the state, have primacy in some of these permitting processes is the fact that if something does go wrong, if there is a local concern, you actually know who to go and talk to. You can talk to the head of DEQ, the head of DOGM, our Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. You can talk to the member of the legislature that represents those communities, and there's much more political accountability.
I wish I had more time. Thank you, witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes Ms. Ledger Fernandez from the state of New Mexico for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair Westerman, and thank you, Ranking Member